How are we going, team? Are we live streaming?
Yes, we're live.
Great. Okay, welcome to everybody on live stream. Hopefully you can see the karakia that we are about to do. And if we begin with that, I will lead. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kine kine ke uta. Kia mā tara tara ke tai. E he aki ana te atakura. He tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. Thank you, everybody. We will start with apologies. I've got apologies from Tyrone, Howard and Luana.
We will have a lateness from Nigel. He's just trying to sign in.
Thank you, Liz. And a lateness from Nigel. We will see him shortly, no doubt. We'll just check that we've got our guests online to begin the day. Is Amanda Healy online? Amanda is zooming in from Christchurch, NZ. She'll be talking to us about the Littleton Council stables with an update on that.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning, everybody.
You can hear us, okay.
Yes, we can. Is that Amanda? And who else do we have today?
We're just having some technical.
This is Paul Rowe, who will be doing most of the talking, hopefully, today, actually. We're just getting the technology set up in our office. He has just run off. Sorry about this. Please
Oh,
do
no,
for a
it's
minute.
fine, it's fine.
If you can hear me, I could probably just start talking, and Paul's, we've got a brief presentation to take you through anyway, so he can get us up and operational for that. Anyway, look, thank you for having us today. Paul Rowe is our development manager, and he's been doing most of the technical feasibility work in Littleton, so he's the man with all the information. I'll just give you a brief overview. CNZ was asked by council to consider the future of the stable site, bearing in mind the heritage nature of it, but also the wider site itself, which is, if you're familiar with it, it's a bit of a tricky one. The aim was to determine if development of the site is commercially and technically feasible, and what will be required in particular for the restoration of the heritage building. That piece of work is now almost complete, and Paul, as I said, will talk you through in a bit more detail. So we really just wanted to bring you guys in at this point, and I know that some of you may be aware of the work going on, to really say what we've done so far, and seek your general views on the site, and then talk about what's the right way forward for the stables building and the site itself. Bearing in mind, we've just been focused quite specifically on the technical and feasibility of the site. There hasn't been a lot of community engagement or anything like that. For the future of the site, that's absolutely going to have to play a big part in what does the community want for the site, what are the needs that it needs to meet, and those sort of things. That would be a next step. Council owns the site, so it's ultimately the council's decision what they do with it. We can see a role for Christchurch NZ's urban development team in leading a piece of work and coordinating what's going on. But, you know, that's in the next step. So getting your feedback at this stage on that and how we proceed will be useful. We'll be taking a full due diligence report to our CNZ board next month, and then looking to discuss with council how it's managed next, and roles and responsibilities and how we go forward. There is a little more technical work that Paul will lead to confirm some of how we address some of the challenges of the site, but we do believe that there's a potential development option that could be feasible. That'll be a partnership approach. It would have to involve the private sector in generating that some investment. And if you look to some of the work in the New Brighton regeneration project, how we've pulled together different strands of activities to create a regeneration project and a coordinated approach. As I said, informal discussions with some community members so far, only in the specific work Paul's been doing, but absolutely those conversations and hearing from yourselves would have to lead the way forward. I think we're just about, I think that timing was impeccable. Paul sounds like he's just about got us up and running with the presentation. He'll go through.
That we're just trying to deal with.
We've just got
some weird stuff on our screen.
We've got 2 IT people here.
Oh, great. Can you hear us at all? Or is
Yeah,
it
we can absolutely hear you. So
you just can't see us, is that right?
I can see you. You just sort of we can't.
Yeah, because it says like it's being live streamed.
I think
to you.
then there's something. There's just a little big notification across your screen saying this is being live streamed, so we can't move it. I don't know if it's something at your end that you can see that we can't control.
Maybe our team can fill in a little bit more, but I had that across my screen too, and I had to press OK for it to disappear. What have our team got any other advice for these guys?
That's what you need to press is OK. Just remind participants we are live streaming to the public. Are you having trouble sharing your presentation?
No, we can share the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll just go for it.
Okay. Well, thank you for persevering with us through that. We appreciate it. As I say, Paul will talk in a little bit more detail now, and then look, we really want to hear from you guys about your views on the site itself and the area and how we approach the next steps and get some of your feedback to take that forward. So what Paul will share with you is some background. He's got some pictures which are all concepts at this stage, and there has obviously been no decisions made on what exactly will happen until the next stage. So I'll hand over to Paul. Thank you.
So I'll just share my screen. Presentation. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So obviously you're familiar with the site. One glance to the key, council-owned property, approximately 3,486 square metres in size. It's located at the southeastern edge of the Littleton Commercial Centre. Most of the site has been closed to the public since 2010, 2011 earthquakes, which resulted in the demolition of the former Littleton Museum and severe damage to the stables. The Littleton Information Centre is the only other building remaining on site. In June 2021, council sought registrations of interest for the repair and lease of the Littleton Borough stables. While there were some interested parties part of that registration, none were able to make the project stack financially, mainly due to technical and commercial challenges. So we've had a look at it since then. Matt has briefed you on how we got here, I guess. And we believe the site's redevelopment is a really good opportunity to encourage and support some key outcomes on these and adjacent privately owned sites, hopefully, catalysing some further redevelopment into the block and bringing more vibrancy and life to the township. Some of those key challenges, which I'll go through now, high level, were the geotechnical risks of the redevelopment and the associated. Are we there? Yeah, cool. The costs associated to mitigate those risks. There's also a lot of heritage and archaeological importance across the site and the buildings, as you all know, and these also have impacts on development outcomes. Additional challenges, the cost and feasibility to repair and restore the Donald Street stables, as well as the commercial viability of establishing a viable future use for the building. Additional challenges include infrastructure upgrade costs across a number of different aspects and consenting risks as well. So our first action as part of this was to characterise some of these risks, and we did a piece of work the last few months digging into the site. We've looked at some preliminary geotechnical investigations, including condition assessments of the scoria retaining walls across the site. There's quite a few out there. We've looked at some site contamination briefly across some of the areas, given the previous uses of the site and the surrounding land uses. We've done a high-level civil infrastructure assessment. We've looked at the constructability and feasibility and what's involved in that. We've done planning. We've done some heritage and archaeological assessments, digging into some of that significance across the site, surveys, and more specifically, we've done a conceptual structural design for repair and restoration of the stables building, which has its own hooks and challenges. So this is a really high level when you say conceptual, it's not a detailed design. It's just looking high level what we might need to do to pull it up to an acceptable occupiable standard. So we looked at a concept to achieve 80% NBS of the building code, and it's currently assessed at having 3%, which is why it's closed off to the public. And we've done some high level cost estimates for repair and restoration of the building based on that scheme. Additional work that we've done, we've had some high level conversations with members of the community, and we've also done a whole range of assessments of mixed use options for the site. So this has included medium, high density housing options, car parking, office and co-working spaces, hospitality, retail and event spaces, light industrial and workshop spaces, more aligning with artisan workspaces and art studios. We've also looked at outdoor performance and recreational space in different areas of the site. In all of these considerations, we've also considered integrating expansion spaces for the existing and new community activities, such as the tool library, the Littleton Makerspace, some new music studios and other compatible activities. And through these informal discussions we've had with community as well, we've identified 4 key outcomes for the site, which would encapsulate a lot of this work and a lot of these different uses that we're considering, or what someone might consider. And that would be living, community, heritage and destination. Right. Any questions so far? I can take you through some of the concepts we've done for the Donald Street stables, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Very high level, so it's all artist impressions only, nothing particularly detailed, but this is just an impression of what it might look like if we were able to repair the stables, if council were able to repair them. Some additional modern attachments. We've looked at some examples overseas of what's worked elsewhere, even the local ones. This is the substation in Milton Street, which is a pretty successful conversion. And there's another, just a simple artist impression of it, like maybe a nighttime destination, markets, studio spaces, that sort of thing. And then broadly across the site, these are some of the other options we've looked at. So we may have some terrace housing up the top here in Four Sumner Road, particularly challenging site, but so far so good. There's some archaeological challenges there as well. We've looked at some housing options in here as well as commercial. This is that terrace just above the stables building, kind of connecting to its top tier. And then we've looked at a range of different commercial options for the former Littleton Museum site. This just shows one of many that we've looked at, how it might look from a density point of view. And included some potential improvements to the street, Donald Street, improving pedestrian safety and visibility and access.
So yeah, I think that's a summary of some pretty specific and technically and commercially focused work so far, but really we're interested in the views of the board and you know, potentially the next steps of the project, the community too. So I'm happy to answer any questions or really just hear about your thoughts and views on the site itself.
Great. Thanks very much for your presentation there, team. This may be the first time some of our team members have done a Zoom live as a community board meeting. So I'm just reminding people that if they have a question, I'd find it helpful if they go to the reactions button and then they put their hand up and hopefully I can see them do that. If not, we will just wing it. So that's okay. So we'll see if we've got anybody who's got any comments or questions for a start. I know I have a few, but we'll just see what the rest of the board members have to say or ask. Has anybody got anything there? Let me just have a little look.
Well, I do, but I can't find the reactions button. So
you do. No, you go.
I mean, I have heard. So I'm Gillian Frater, by the way. I might say on my underneath, but so I've heard, you know, mutterings about what might happen at the stables. That's as far as I've heard so far. I've only been on the board since February, but I think it's got so much potential here, and I look at the site a lot because I go to the gym at the medical centre. So I'm always in the area each week. And I think I love the artist's impressions and things. And yeah, it looks great. And it's so good that some thought's been going into, so much thought and work has gone into what could happen here. I think there's great potential. You did mention, I think, that, Paul, that there was, you mentioned adjacent sites as well. Mm-hmm. And I think definitely there's some potential there, and those people will be super interested, of course, the owners of those properties and the tenants too, but primarily, I guess, the owners of what could potentially happen where there's some opportunities that come about or that could be created that would help them if they want to develop their sites, and some may and some may not. I know definitely some, it's still in the pipeline. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, and thanks for doing all this amazing work on it. And I'm quite excited by it all, actually. It's so cool.
Great. No, thanks. It's great to hear feedback. Yes, definitely. We hope to engage with those adjacent landowners and hopefully catalyze some more development across the block. Yeah, through this project.
Yep. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. Can't seem to find. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Paul and Amanda. That was a very good presentation. It's very strategic place you are looking at in Littleton. You mentioned in your presentation that you had some high-level conversation with members of the community. Was it in person, or is there a formal or informal? What sort of consultation you had?
Very, very informal. These are conversations we had with members of different groups, Tool Library, Makerspace, Project Littleton, just conversations with person at Littleton.
Yeah, I think it's really important to say we've been asked to do quite a specific piece of work, and we do see an opportunity to do more. But we have been careful not to. I guess you don't want to raise too many expectations about what that might be in our role in it till those decisions have been made. In saying that, Paul's been on the site. You can imagine there's been a lot of activity with the various testing and sites. So he has spoken to people who've reached out or have asked questions. So we've been open about it there. I think when decisions are made on the next step, and if CNZ has a role in leading this, we'd see a really much more formal community process and of gathering feedback and hearing from people.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I expected to hear. Your plan, the idea looks really good. I think it really suits the general outlook of Littleton, and I think you have captured quite a few ideas there. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Looks like Kathy had a question as well there. Go ahead, Kathy.
To what Jill was saying, Gillian, sorry, but also to integrate where it says the reserves and things like that. It is highly, I suppose, slightly disconnected to existing stuff that's happening, like the head-to-head walkway, the time ball and things like that when visitors come, the access way into it. Into those spaces, and where Sumner Road is very highly used by big heavy vehicles and stuff like that. So yeah, great use of space, but just knowing accessibility around, access into the port and heavy trucks and things like that. So I suppose I'm kind of going into infrastructure stuff, but what once you develop a site, all these things start coming into play. And the other site was where the medical center is as well, is very highly used by lots of people. So just wanted to kind of
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I know, and I think Paul has been working in with council on this too, the heritage and property teams. Certainly, transport management and those sorts of things would absolutely be part of a more detailed next stage.
Anybody got any other questions before I ask my ones? Okay, if not, you can always ask after. We've got a little bit of time. Fantastic work, and especially you, Amanda, filibustering at the start there. It's always tricky when technical stuff goes on.
I'm really sorry. Well, I really didn't want that to happen. But,
no,
we've got the workroom in the building for technology. So anyway.
I understand. And actually, you didn't filibuster. You gave really pertinent and important information, so I shouldn't have said that. But what I just want to clarify, I think, really is at this stage with the feasibility around the technological and sort of the geological, there's a lot of stuff there that you guys potentially have to get and are gathering information on, which will inform part of what can be done on those sites. So at this stage, is there anything that we need to know about that in regards to, I don't know, is there any, like, definitely this is not going to work or this is going to go ahead? Is that what you're expecting at this stage?
I think at this stage, this was really more about we realise we haven't talked to you as a board while this piece of work's been going on. So it really is just that, and saying this is what we've been asked to do, and here are the findings. I mean, I'm not the technical expert, but what I hear from these guys a lot is you can build on any site. It just depends how much it costs. So this is about finding a commercially feasible and viable way to do some of the technical stuff. So yes, there will be a way. There's a bit more work to do, but I think Paul, you might add a bit more of the technical.
So far this piece of work has really just been testing the technical feasibility of the site. Is it actually in its own right feasible to get anywhere near, and so far that's looking pretty positive. However, without going down the detailed and the highly technical point of view, without getting specific uses confirmed, we can only say so much. The next stage will be council making a decision on how they want to proceed, and then us potentially looking at a pathway which would include more additional detailed technical feasibility work. So that's and that includes the Donald Street Stables building and any detail work. We have to work with Heritage and Parks on that as well.
Paul's technical work has identified an option that, and bearing in mind, so funding is something that we'll need to speak about, right? But particularly for the heritage aspect, but there are avenues for that. The rest of the site is, there's potentially a commercial option if we split it up and involve development partners and the private sector as well. So it's not something that there is a pot of money there for. It's about finding a way that'll work. But we so getting your guys' input and then potentially your endorsement of a way forward, so that we can say the community board likes the concept and is keen to work with us in the next stage.
Sure. Oh, that's good to know. And we like to work obviously with the community on these projects as well, and I'm curious to know in regards to next steps and any consultation process that may be coming up.
So it depends on the decisions that are made on the way forward. So we'll take this to our board, we'll take a comprehensive due diligence report to our board, and then we'll discuss with council what happens. So council, there are options. So we could enter into some sort of value share agreement with council where we approach the site together. Council teams may wish to say, this is great, thanks, we'll take it and do it ourselves. The council could decide to sell or pass on the site to us. That would trigger disposal of land consultation procedure. But beyond those really specific words, we'd be looking, if CNZ takes on a leadership role in the project, we'd be looking to hold, I don't know if it will require a formal consultation, but certainly community engagement work and setting up sessions so people can get involved and we can learn more.
Love that community engagement, and it looks really exciting. So much potential there. So, and great work, you guys. Really love your work.
It's been fun going over and checking it out and maybe visiting the cafes as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm just going to check with the team, see if there's any last minute comments or questions.
Do feel free to just reach out to us too if you've got more.
Yeah,
We're
if it
here.
comes up.
You've got our emails. We're happy to talk about it.
Cool. Okay, if we've got any questions, we go through our staff, but we know the avenue to go
Yes.
through to.
Of course.
we try and do a good process here whenever we can. But thank you. That's really encouraging to know that you guys are open for more questions going forward. So that's fantastic to hear. Yeah, thanks for your time coming to see us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks very
Thank you.
much for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thanks for
No,
having me.
it's
Thank you.
fantastic. Cheers.
Bye. You too.
Okay. Now, who have we got next? We have got, hopefully, Adam Eagleton from Parks. Well, he's going to talk about Parks and Reserves bylaw. Do we have him on a line?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'll just find my presentation to share.
Oh, that's all good. And we've got Paul Devlin as well. Is he online?
Yep, I'm here, guys.
Hey, Paul. Good morning.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I've just got a short presentation to give a bit of an update around the review of the Parks and Reserve bylaw that's currently underway. And Paul has also joined in case we have any sort of specific questions around Banks and Peninsula Parks. And he's also got a wealth of experience in a lot of the issues that we're dealing with and actually administering the bylaw. So simply put, what the purpose of the bylaw is it seeks to provide the orderly management and control of parks and reserves that are under the control of council for the benefit and enjoyment of all users. The bylaw is made under two pieces of legislation, the Local Government Act and the Reserves Act. And the really important part about that is every clause in the bylaw must meet the requirement of either one of those pieces of legislation. And that these acts give the council the power to make the bylaws and to put limitations on some of the activities that can and can't happen in reserves. And it also provides the enforcement tools that we have. So what do I mean when we talk about parks and reserves? There's a lot of green space in the district, and there's other land managers such as the Department of Conservation and Environment Canterbury. So what this one is looking at is land that has been legally declared a reserve, council parks such as the mains, the foreshore and other green spaces, but it does not include land that has been leased. So a wee snapshot of what some of these assets that we're talking about looks like. These numbers are taken from the 2024 Parks and Foreshore Asset Management Plan, and they give you a little bit of an idea about the scale of what this bylaw touches. You can see that we've got just over 10,000 hectares of parkland, over 100 regional parks, 1,500 kilometres of walking tracks and paths, and just over 400 playgrounds, just to name a few. So some things that this bylaw covers, it's got three main parts. The first part talks about access to reserves, when they're open to the public and when they may be closed. The second part talks about prohibited and restricted activities in reserves. And the third part talks about special areas. And so here are some subsets within that. We've got behaviour in reserves, animals, the rules relating to animals in reserves, vehicles, the rules relating to where vehicles can be parked, their access to reserves, fires, we've got restrictions on lighting fires in parks and reserves, restrictions on camping, on the use of aircraft and drones in reserves. We've got restrictions around sports and other organised events, which are provisions related to the playing of sports and games in parks and reserves. And there's some certain special areas set aside, particularly Hagley Park, the Botanic Gardens and Ralph Golf Course. So some examples of the bylaw in action, just to give you an idea, would be activities such as visitors removing plants from Hagley Park. That would be against clause 6 in the bylaw, where you cannot remove a shrub or plant from a reserve without permission. We've got ideas like helicopters taking off a landing in a park or reserve without permission. That's against clause 13.1, which states that you cannot do that without permission of an authorised officer. Member of the park entering a park that is closed for repairs. Again, we have clause stating that you need permission to access any reserve that's been closed. And then we've got things like a member of the public lighting a fire in a reserve without permission, which is banned under section 10 of the current bylaw. So some areas of interest. These are things that staff have been looking at over the last few months when we're reviewing the bylaw. One of them is updating any legislation or references in the bylaw that may be out of date, given that this was first brought in 2016. So an example of this is updating references to show that Fire and Emergency New Zealand is now the primary agency responsible for managing fire in the district. Currently, there's clauses to the Christchurch City Council Urban Safety Fire Bylaw, which was revoked when FENZ took over as the primary agency here. So we'll be looking to update those. We've got the impact of e-scooters and new forms of land transport. So in 2016, again, there just wasn't the same uptake of e-scooters and e-devices. So we're looking at how the new bylaw might need to reflect the widespread use of these devices. We've got the role of bylaw in occupation style protests. This came about following some of the occupation style protests that occurred in October 2021 and April 2022. So council commissioned an independent report that looked at our response to this. As part of this, it asked us to look when we were reviewing relevant bylaws if there was any improvements that could be made. So we've looked into this, and currently there are no suggested changes or amendments in this area. That's mainly because this bylaw already limits things like camping, building or constructing things on sites, interference with reserves, and there's no infringement powers under this specific bylaw, so we are limited in what can be done. Another issue we've looked at is permissions under the bylaw. Particularly, we've looked at in circumstances where we've given a permission and then the conditions of that permission have been breached and the process we can undertake to revoke that. So we're looking at how that process might be clearer and in some cases might be easier so that we can correct people that are getting permission and then not keeping to the conditions. And camping clarity. We get a lot of requests where we've got people camping in parks, how it interacts with the Freedom Camping Bylaw or the Parks and Reserves Bylaw. So we're just looking to make it clear how the two different pieces of legislation and the two bylaws work together. So what we're doing currently is we're still working with staff across the organisation, and we're drafting what the potential amended bylaw may look like. And we're working towards taking a paper to council in October, asking them for approval to go out to consult with the public on the draft that we have. So I guess what I'm trying to achieve in the time before then is talk to as many people that may have an interest and see what their issues are, what their concerns are, what things that they may want included. There's also an opportunity for the board when it does go out to consultation to put in formal a formal piece of consultation or a formal response. I've been working quite closely with, Paul's been feeding me in some of the concerns that he's come across in his work. And you're welcome, if you do have any other issues that aren't raised now, to feed things through Paul or through myself. But yeah, a key point as well is this is one of the bylaws that largely the response I've been receiving is that it's working quite well. Staff have been using it as an effective tool, but we are always trying to make these things better. So that's a short update of what we've been working on, and I'm happy to take any questions, or I'm also happy to engage in any sort of correspondence after the meeting too.
Thank you so much, Adam. That's very informative, and I no doubt we'll have lots of questions. I mean, so much of Banks Peninsula is park or reserve, so this is going to impact us, and obviously things have been working well, but there's some things I'm sure we're happy to look at and maybe even tweak. Has anybody got any questions or comments? While they're thinking about it, so we have quite a few reserve committees. How does the bylaw at this point in time, or any potential changes, affect our reserve committees?
My understanding is we're looking at how the reserve committees had previously been included as an authorised officer.
Okay.
So we're reviewing if that's still appropriate for, given that the role authorised officers take on. So that could potentially be one area.
What is an authorised officer?
An authorised officer is a defined term under the bylaw, and it's a defined term where certain activities need permission. You can seek permission of an authorised officer, which generally mean rangers appointed by the council under the Reserves Act, or specific staff members appointed to perform certain duties to, enable permissions for, say, helicopters to take off and land in certain circumstances.
Right. Because we're happy to be supporting our reserve committees wherever possible. We feel that they are so valuable in what they do. So we just would love to see that continue, obviously.
Yep.
It looks like Gillian's got a question, far away.
It was just about the e-scooters, Adam, and presumably there's some issue in that, I wonder if there are some issues that have come up that you figure the bylaw needs to change in relation to, or whether it's just acknowledging that there's new technology out there, and wherever it says bicycle or something, you also add in other things too, but which one of those?
In a large part, it's like the acknowledgement that whenever we review these, we're looking for what's changed and what we need to think about. So we are quite limited with any provisions we put in need to be specifically about the parks and reserves. So I know there's a lot of a wider issue around using them as a transport device, and there's just areas we can't go. But we are looking, for instances, we've got clauses around where you may park a bicycle, certain areas where you can't ride a bicycle through, such as the Botanic Gardens. And those are the sort of areas where we're like, actually, is it more appropriate if we say that you also can't take an e-scooter through there? So there is some scope where we think that they may be a negative impact for things like e-scooters. But we are also limited to the tools that the Reserves Act and the Local Government Act give us. So,
yeah, okay, thank you.
Kathy, you've got your hand up.
Did you say me?
Yes, sorry, I forgot to turn my mic off
just
when I was
wanted
talking.
to raise just some concerns around reserves, and just sort of, I don't know if that's the correct term, but the term of creeping into reserves, when private property is probably like backing into a reserve, and you kind of have a creep into the reserves, and sort of like how strong are bylaws into kind of taking action on things like that? Or would that include like road reserves, because that's all public spaces as well, but creep into spaces like that?
are you talking about particularly access into reserves from private property?
Well, yes, but private property kind of extending their way into reserves.
Yes, that's probably not something. It's probably not something that the bylaw would specifically look at. That would be more in some of the planning or different parts of council. But that's certainly something I'll have a look at.
It's concerning. It does happen, but it's probably by such small.
The main focus is it's around behaviour and reserves, but I can also see if it falls under that envelope.
Thank you.
I heard Paul in the background there as well. Did you have a comment or something you wanted to say, Paul?
Paul Devlin, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what Kathy's thinking about. So yeah, there are issues around that, but the Reserves Act the bylaw would have some things that would help with enforcement. So So yeah, so it does touch on that, because that would be, you know, disturbance or removal of materials and stuff. So we've got a few current issues underway with this in Cass Bay and other areas. So I'll talk with the team on how we can make sure that there's nothing counterproductive in the bylaw on it.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Paul.
Can I have clarification around what an e-scooter is?
There's a lot of different definitions, and it depends what one you want to use. So you can look at the Land Transport Act, you can look at Wakata Tahi's. Generally, I mean, you can look at wattage, low wattage for some of the speeds they can go at, but that's actually one of the things that is a surprisingly difficult issue, is looking at how you define. And yeah, I don't think there's a set answer in stone yet, because as you can see on the streets, you've got some of those lime scooters that go, you know, 20 kilometers, and then you've got other people on their own super powered thing going as fast as traffic. So we're looking at how that gets defined.
Yeah, and potentially around the hills too. So my question is, what kind of bylaw might be under sort of more motorbike style, electric motorbike style?
Yeah, that's an issue Paul's raised with me as well. Those sort of high-powered electric, almost dirt bikes. Yeah, we're looking. I mean, a lot of those items would be almost classified as vehicles, which would be banned in certain areas. So once again, it's an issue of trying to find the appropriate definition for, you know, where they're included with the rules.
Okay. I've seen, Liz, have you got something that you need to comment on?
Good morning, Adam. Many of the things that I get from elected members in the community is confusion between freedom camping and the reserves bylaw. So is there a way in the bylaw to refer better to the freedom camping bylaw?
Absolutely. So we are looking at including an explanatory note, because as staff, we spend a lot of time responding to those questions as well. So the bylaw sets out that no one may camp in a reserve unless it's specifically been set aside as a camping area, or if they have the prior written permission of an authorised officer. So we've got, the reason it becomes complicated is it's banned in the Parks and Reserves bylaw, and there's also areas where it's against the freedom camping bylaw as well. The difference is in the enforcement tools. So with the Freedom Camping Act, there's a power for infringements, and with the Parks and Reserves bylaw, we don't have that power. So quite often it becomes a case of with enforcement, what's the best bylaw to use? But the short answer is camping in a park or reserve without permission is against the bylaw.
Yep.
Unless it's an area specifically set aside for that.
Yep. And
but we are looking at an explanatory note that clarifies how those two bylaws interact together, and when's the most appropriate time for either one.
Yeah, that's a big topic for us here on BP. Yeah, I wonder if Gillian and Asif have things about that as well. Gillian?
No, I was still put up my hand when we were still talking about e-scooters. Just that I figure that a lot of other councils around the country would be grappling with the same issues. So presumably there's there's talk sometimes with what other people are doing, because it's everyone doesn't need to reinvent the wheel, so to speak.
Yes, no, we are talking with our other colleagues, other councils. I mean, a lot of their Parks and Reserve, a lot of the bylaws across areas such as Parks and Reserve have quite a few similarities. So we are checking in to see if they are doing something, if it's working effectively or not.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Adam.
Asif, you've got a question.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Adam and Paul. 3 points I just want to raise here. Two are a question and one is a comment. Is there any item in the bylaw that talks about weed control in council reserves? I'm referring mainly ghosts and other weeds, they potentially become fire hazard?
Paul can correct me if he knows better, but I don't think there's anything specifically around weed control. The clauses are more around if you interfere with things in a reserve. So the clauses are more aimed at the people that would come and take flowers or plants from a reserve, not about how the council chooses to manage the plants within the reserve. Those would be more like reserve management plans. So the bylaw doesn't sort of set out how the council will manage the asset. It's more what behaviours are permitted or not.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So we just use the regional pest plan from ECAN in terms of weed stuff, and then if there was a fire issue, ASIF would be working with PENS on determining whether it's a fire hazard or not.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Thank you. And the second, you answered that. So that's the last one. Did you get some do you get some feedback from customer service in terms of updating this plan? You know, every 10 years you do you update bylaws. So is there anything that information that you receive from the public and you include in the bylaw?
So for me, the information I receive is I have a role bringing together all the parks units, leading the bylaws over the last 10 years. What issues have arisen? What are the problems this bylaw still needs to address? So a lot of that relies on what messages they've been receiving over the last 10 years, what have become their issues. So we look at the bylaw and say, are the clauses in this bylaw still meeting the problems that existed? Are there any issues that have arisen that the bylaw no longer addresses? So we also look to see not just if we need new clauses, but if some of the clauses are no longer relevant or no longer fit for purpose. So a lot of that is just done through what staff in different teams have either heard from the community or we've received via written responses or email requests. A good example is the one Liz raised. We've received a lot of questions around how the Freedom Camping Act works with the Parks and Reserves bylaw. So that was something that we were like, well, we've been getting a lot of questions on this. Maybe we need to start making this clearer. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Adam and Paul. Yeah, much appreciated.
Yeah,
And
it's definitely.
sorry, Lynn. Further to Adam's comment, Asif, of course, this will be going out for formal consultation, which the public will have an input, and staff will then have to address any other concerns that come through that submission period.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, so just going back to the freedom camping, is there anything else to report specifically that might impact Banks Peninsula from the feedback that you've already received, I guess?
So far, there's nothing I think specifically that would be changing with the rules regarding to camping. We're looking, there's no major changes with how the rule setting with regards to camping, the direction that is in. The only thing we'd look to do is just make it clearer, because I think for people that don't deal with our bylaws very often, it can be difficult to know, you know, what bylaw does what, and particularly around enforcement, what the enforcement tools available are. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
Yeah,
good
we'll
next
look
step,
to make that clearer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's just a large issue we have with a lot of bylaws, is because on a day-to-day basis, the general public don't read or know about them. So we just need to make them as clear and as plain English as possible.
Right. That sounds like a really good next step. And for myself, we do a lot of reading in our day-to-day, so making things clear and everyday language is always so helpful wherever possible.
Yeah, we try, but yeah.
No, thank you for trying. Any last comments or questions before we wrap up with Adam and Paul, who's online? Thank you.
No, thank you. No questions. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're all good. Thank you so much for your time, Adam and Paul. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's really good to have these updates and hear about, you know, bylaws that are how they help support our communities and also protect them. I think that's really, really important. So really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Okay,
All good.
thanks.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.
Great. Now, I had made notes from the agenda because I couldn't have my agenda up at the same time. Liz, was there anything else that's popped up that we're needing to cover right now?
Not right now, Lynn. I'll be contacting you later today. Just to let you know that Nigel wasn't able to, he had technology problems, and here's an apology for today.
Okay, that's good to know, Nigel. So while we're live, is there anything else formal that we need to do other than the karakia?
No.
Nope, that is good. We will finish with the karakia, then we will go off live streaming and we'll just, go from there. We'll wait for the karakia to come up and I'm happy to lead us in that. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau. Te tinana, te wārua e te ara takata. Koia rā e rongo, whakaaria, ake ki runga, kei tina, huie, taikie. Kia ora. And we're just going to go off live streaming. Thanks for joining us today. Just let us know when we're off live stream. That would be great. Thank you.